Hey everyone. Okay, so I wanted to do a quick video in response to an older video. Older by, I mean like a few weeks. I've been doing a handful of videos as of late. If you're a subscriber, you know that. And the one that was titled "Millennial Mothers Must Now Convince Their Husbands That It's Best for Them to Stay Home" had more comments than any other video that I did. So I wanted to address this again and read some of those comments and expound upon this topic a little further because it's one that's sort of near and dear to my heart. I cover it in the book that I have coming up this year called How to Get Hitched and Stay Hitched. I could not feel more strongly about this. And apparently a lot of you do as well. And I want to read some of those comments because you did a better way of explaining it than I could even. So for those of you who don't know, if you didn't see it, you can scroll back and you can pause this and go back and look at it now and come back if you'd like. But essentially, I was talking about an article that had been written in I don't even remember where now, but the wife was having to convince her husband that she wanted to let her stay home with their new baby, and that was different from the plan that they had originally, and so it caused conflict and. It caused conflict. So one woman, this is one response from one woman, one comment from one woman on that video. It's really hard to plan for something like this because a lot of women today have been socialized to believe that they will want to keep working after a baby, and they truly believe it. Before my son was born, I talked ad nauseum with my husband on how I wanted to make sure he was ready to take on a large part of the childcare because I had been convinced that I was not going to be a natural mother and that I would not be able to take on the role of primary caregiver. We had a great plan to make sure we both would be able to continue our lives and our careers, but the second that baby was in my arms, I experienced a huge priority shift, and I was ready to give up everything I cared so intensely about before to be able to stay with my child. I had no idea this kind of intense shift would occur and had not even entertained the possibility. There were a lot of responses from men who sort of, well, not just men, but definitely some men who were asking questions like, well, how is the man supposed to know in advance what she's going to do? And what about if she changes the plan and we had decided something different? Why is that fair to me or what have you? This is literally one of the reasons why I do what I do. For one thing, the message to women that they should assume that they're not going to stay home or not going to be able to stay home financially, which they are told from the day they're born, is a lie. And what happens is, well, first of all, there's no acknowledgement of the fact that something happens to you physiologically, biologically, a woman that is, and really happens to men too, but much more so with a woman, where your priorities absolutely do shift, and there's no acknowledgement of what it's going to feel like to hold your baby in your arms and how absolutely magical that is, and why everything else pales in comparison to wanting to care for that baby. Because they don't hear this very important message, which applies to most people, which will apply to most people, that experience, they're mapping out their lives with a completely different plan in mind, and that affects everything. It affects the career you choose. It affects your choice of a marriage partner. It affects your financial decisions because you're making assumptions about how you're going to experience life post-baby that are A, inaccurate, but B, will affect your financial life. So, for example, there are couples who will buy a home based on their two incomes rather than on one income, and then get stuck later on when they decide they don't want to be both working full-time year-round all the time forevermore. And they can't because they've made this purchase. So you can see how far-reaching the effects are of this just one, there's a lot of them, just this one lie to women, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to address that video. Do that video to begin with. Okay, this comment's from a Roberto. He writes, I know almost no men who don't want their wife to stay home with a baby, but I know lots of women who claim they're being oppressed if a man wants them to stay home with a baby. And there's no question about that. Men have no voice. Let's just say a man grew up in a divorced household and would like a wife who is willing to stay home and be a mother in a way that he didn't. He can't convey that because if he does, he's oppressing her. What? No. I mean, that's why when you're getting together and you're dating, you've got to figure out what your respective values are. They need to match, bottom line. And here's where the question comes in, where the guys will ask, well, what if the woman says she wants to continue working and she never wants to stay home? Well, then if you're the kind of guy who wants something different, then you don't marry her, period. If her priorities are not your priorities, you don't marry her. Okay, and then here's one other comment from a gentleman who did not leave his name. I live in Wisconsin, and this is definitely prevalent in some circles I have seen. I saw it a lot more in my 20s among coworkers. I'm 37 now, working for myself as a consultant. I still meet a lot of people at many places who are dual income and demand a second income from their spouse. I guess I'm different in that I saw having a family as a push and opportunity with support from my wife to elevate our lives rather than resign myself to an average income and requiring a second person working. He wrote more, but I'm going to say something about that first. That's another thing. The assumptions are really what's getting people off track, because your mindset just does something different. For example, when I met my husband, it was very clear what our priorities were. They matched. I was going to stay home. He was going to be the major breadwinner, the primary breadwinner, at least for X amount of years. Went a little bit farther than I intended. That propelled him forward, so that if I had been working full-time year-round alongside him with that second full-time income, he would not have felt as pushed as he did, voluntarily so, to rise as far as he did, because he knew it was on him. And now that doesn't mean that it's permanently that way. And you do have to be able to work together financially, so that there are things that you're going to have to cut out. So in those early years when we were on one income, we lived very differently than we do today. I mean, we're almost empty nesters. We're in a very different boat financially than we were in the early years. And that's part of it. That is absolutely part of it. And the trade-off is so worth it. It's like you don't even care about that extra income when you are able to be there and to enjoy that time of your life. But there is no question that the world has changed so dramatically with the expectations and the assumptions that this does make it significantly harder today, which is why I tell young people, young women in particular, assume the opposite, the exact opposite of what you're told. Assume that you will live on one income and start preparing for that in advance. Back to that email from the gentleman. Then he said, unfortunately, people are reactionary, and feminism suggests that thousands of years of biology are somehow tossed out the window. It's insanity, really, very damaging to people. People go into it with the wrong attitude. Bingo, that's exactly what I was saying. I wish people would come from a standpoint of, what do we want out of life? Okay, we want a family. Where do we want to live? How much do we want to travel? How expensive are our hobbies and the passions that we want to pursue? Okay, so now you write those things down, and how do you best balance your lives to get there? But instead it's just, hey, did you go to school? Cool, yeah. Did you? Yeah, I went too. Let's get married and play house like we're living the American dream. And then they wake up one day having the bullshit conversation that the guy in this video was having with his wife about not wanting her to stay home. Amen. Amen. That is what I keep coming back to, and what I ask women when I talk with them. What do you want? What do you want? And when you figure that out, you map your life out accordingly with somebody who wants what you want. You don't wait and get stuck down the line. Make assumptions that are opposite of what you're told, and you will come out ahead. That's basically the bottom line. There's a lot more to this, obviously. I'm going to be talking a lot more about these things. And as I said, if you saw the video on how to get hitched and stay hitched, the 12-step program for marriage-minded women, that's coming up in a few months. I'm going to be talking a lot about that on video, so a lot more to come. But I just wanted to address that one video that I did because it got so many comments. Okay, till next time. Thanks.